So this video has been over 6 months in the making. I've been testing both the Fenix 7 Pro, Fenix and Fenix 8 against the Apple Watch Ultra 2 to see which suits me and suits my needs best. So this has been going on since about October. Been using both watches, two watches pretty consistently over this period. I run, swim, cycle, hike, and I use the watches for tracking and motivating me to just generally improve my fitness. I'm no world-class athlete. I'm just using the tools to help me stay fit and healthy. And so I'm hoping you'll find some value in this comparison if you're looking to buy either one of these watches. This isn't a spec-by-spec comparison of the two. This is more about the differences that I found in the way that I use the watches and basically which has suited me better over the time. Now, this video might get a bit long, so please stick with it. Should be worth it. But in all honesty, it's hard to do a comparison of these kind of devices without taking the time to do it properly. So there are a lot of similarities and there are a lot of differences, so hopefully this video will be helpful to you. Right off the bat, I don't have the Fenix 8 anymore. I actually returned that watch within the return window, and I'll come to the reasons why a bit later in the video, but suffice to say that the Fenix 7 Pro and the Fenix 8 are 90+% the same watch. There's a few minor differences, and I've got a video which I've done previously comparing the Fenix 8 and the Fenix 7 Pro, which will be up here somewhere, which you can have a look at if you want to look at the differences between the two, but do that after watching this video. The Fenix 8 just didn't work out for me for a couple of very, very specific reasons, which became very annoying in the time that I had that watch. So I'll come to that a bit later. And very quickly, if you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Over 90+% of you watching my videos are not subscribed. So if you do like the content and you get some value out of it, please don't forget to subscribe. So A, it helps the channel out massively, and also YouTube can notify you when I release another video. Again, going back to between the Fenix 7 Pro and the Fenix 8, because they are so similar, the Fenix 8 is obviously the latest watch, most expensive. Fenix 7 Pro still available, but at pretty heavy discount, to be fair. So, I don't think you'd be disappointed with going for the Fenix 7 Pro instead of the Fenix 8 and saving yourself a bunch of cash to spend on whatever else you want to. In the interest of getting the best comparison, I've often been wearing Apple Watch here, Garmin Fenix on here, which, if you're out for a run or something like that, it's fine because nobody's really going to notice. But in day-to-day life, it has looked a bit strange. But I've been doing this for myself and also to create the best video for you guys. So hopefully give you a really good comparison between the two. So I'm going to break this video down into 5 sections. First one is design and interface. The second is app, connectivity and smartwatch features. Third is like daily and general tracking and sleep tracking. 4 is battery life. And finally, 5th is the sports features, and then I'll have a little conclusion at the end, let you know where I've actually landed. So let's start with design and interface. Garmin is obviously the more watch-like looking smartwatch, which got quite of a semi-traditional dive watch aesthetic. The Apple Watch Ultra 2, quite frankly, looks like a smaller iPhone strapped to your wrist, but the form factor can have its benefits because, you've got a square versus a circle, so generally, you've probably got more usable screen real estate on the Apple Watch Ultra. Although Garmin themselves, they do make use of the round screen with, round elements and text around the edges very, very well, to be fair. So I think neither is better or worse than the other in this instance. Garmin interface, though, when using the watch is quite clunky. It's quite a convoluted menu system. It's slightly better on the Fenix 8 versus the Fenix 7 Pro. But in some ways, it's a bit akin to putting lipstick on a pig. Very sorry to any pigs who might be watching this video. There are lots of menu levels on the Garmin, and sometimes it's not really clear whether you are actually changing the setting that you want. Is it a global setting, or is it a setting specifically for this activity profile that you might currently be in? It is, I've had a Garmin since about 2008. I think I had the 405 CX way back then. It doesn't really feel like Garmin's interface has moved on very much in this many years. It's gotten a bit more colourful, it's gotten a bit brighter, but actually it's still relatively clunky and relatively difficult to use. It does work fine though, and once you get your head around it, you'll have no problems actually using it. But in some ways, I guess having a bit of a clunky, convoluted menu goes hand in hand with just having so many features that are packed into the Garmin watches. I can imagine, I'm not a software developer, but I can imagine it's not an easy task organizing all these things to make them the easiest to use. In the latest version on the Fenix 8, it's gained a lot more color and a lot more iconography versus just sort of basic text on previous models. But at the core, it's very much the same interface that Garmin has been using for quite a long time. Now, if you've had previous iterations of the watch, obviously that's going to be a good thing because you will feel right at home using the new watch versus the older watch. The good thing about the Garmin, though, you can use the buttons or the screen to interact with everything on the watch. You're not limited to just using the touchscreen. There are buttons to cover basically every interaction: up, down, select, back, light, power. And you can even sort of hold two buttons together for a combination to do shortcuts, which is very handy if you can remember what they are. But also, just in general, when you're actually out and about and you're doing a workout and you're very sweaty or you're in the rain, you don't have to try and use that screen to swipe around. You can use the buttons, which are obviously going to give you much more positive feedback and obviously a much more positive interaction because you know you're selecting the right thing and the wet screen isn't hampering what you're doing. In contrast, the Apple Watch Ultra, the majority of the interaction is going to be via the screen. There are obviously the digital crown, the action button, and the other side button. Not sure what they call it, but majority of the interaction is going to be via the screen. You've got to do all your selecting and swiping around mostly via the screen. Both watches are 100 meters water resistant. All three watches have 100-meter water resistance, but the Fenix 8 and the Apple Watch Ultra are actually dive certified down to 40 meters, whereas the Fenix 7 Pro isn't. So that's probably one of the differences between the Fenix 7 Pro and the Fenix 8, where you might want to go towards the Fenix 8. But I think this is where the major compromise came with the Fenix 8 and why I actually returned it, because moving to a dive certified device has necessitated the need to move to capacitive buttons on the Fenix 8. And in all honesty, those buttons are terrible. They're mushy, they've got very little feedback, and you don't get the same clicky experience you get with the Fenix 7, where you've got a very positive click and you can feel the click. It's very mushy, and often what I found is that pressing the buttons on the Fenix 8, they just didn't register properly. And that was extremely frustrating for me, especially when I wanted to go and use the torch, which, yes, they have a torch. You can double tap the one of the buttons to get to the torch, but almost 99% of the time when I did that double tap gesture the first time, it only registered as one click and it didn't register as the double click. So it turned the light on the screen, but it didn't actually turn the torch on. The Fenix range does have a torch, which might sound silly to have on a watch, but I can't tell you the number of times that having a torch on the watch has come in handy. Even for the simple things of lighting your way around the house in the night, in the dark, so you don't step on pieces of Lego or other toys that have been left lying around by the kids. And the Garmin torch is bright. It has 4 levels of brightness, and it also has a red setting, which you might want to use at night time to stop it from dazzling your eyes. And it's also really nicely integrated into the top of the watch, meaning it doesn't look like an eyesore or doesn't look out of place, that you've got this sort of reasonably strong torch sticking out the side of the watch. Another great feature about having a torch on the Garmin watches is you can actually have the light flash while you're out running at night, say in the dark, or out running early in the morning in the dark. So it's just from a safety perspective, it's really good. For me, I usually run early morning and it is generally quite dark then. Living in the UK, especially over the winter months, it's pretty dark. So having that torch function, just having that red light flashing onto the ground and around me, just raises that awareness of people around me that, hey, I'm here, don't run me over. Apple Watch tries to have a torch by lighting up the screen to full brightness, but I mean, it works to a degree, but it's nowhere near as good as the Garmin torch. The Apple Watch will light up the floor, for example, at night so that you can see where you're going and not step on things. But having that flashing feature for running is just not something that it can do because it doesn't have a separate torch. You just be flashing the screen all the time. The Garmin torch on the watch is just far more flexible, much brighter, and just a much better experience to use than trying to light up the screen. The screen on the Apple Watch, though, is extremely bright, probably one of the brightest screens you'll see on any device. I think it does 3000 nits of brightness, whatever that means. And so legibility in direct sunlight has never been an issue, even out and about in the spring sun right now. It's 25 degrees outside in the UK, it's quite bright. No issues. Even a couple of weeks back, was in Abu Dhabi, no problem seeing the screen. even in the 40-degree heat out there. So no problems there whatsoever. Legibility of the screen on the Fenix 7 Pro again is fantastic. It uses a memory and pixel MIP display, so actually the more light you shine on the screen, the brighter the screen looks. Conversely, with that you do need to have a backlight to see the screen at night, which can be a little bit jarring because the backlight can be a bit bright. The Fenix 8, like the Apple Watch, has an AMOLED display. It's not quite as bright as the Apple Watch. I never had a problem in the time that I had it with outdoor readability on the Fenix 8, but it's not quite as bright as the Apple Watch. So I didn't have that in the summer, I had that more in the winter. It was still bright, but didn't have the blazing summer sun onto the watch. So I don't think it would have been a problem, but it's definitely not quite as bright as the Apple Watch's screen. Weight-wise, the Apple Watch Ultra, mine weighs in at 64 grams, whereas the Fenix 7 Pro that I've got here weighs in at 51 grams. So there's 25% actually additional weight on the Apple Watch, but really with 13 grams or so, don't really notice the difference on the wrist when actually being worn. I guess the Apple Watch is fully made from titanium, save for the screen and the heart rate sensor at the back, whereas the Fenix range is largely made of resin, plastic kind of case, sandwiched between two titanium layers. So I think this is where the weight difference comes from. Apple Watch Ultra 2, is obviously recognizable straight away as an Apple Watch. It's got that rounded square aesthetic. And if you're used to using an iPhone, the interface on the Apple Watch Ultra, you're going to find that very easy to adjust to. It's just like using a small iPhone on your wrist, and it's much, much simpler to get around than Garmin's interface. Most things are exactly where you'd expect them on the Apple Watch Ultra menus, but obviously it's far less customizable than Garmin's watch. There's a lot more you can customize and do if you dig all the way deep into the settings on the Garmin watches. The Apple Watch keeps it a bit more simpler for the masses. Sometimes simpler is better though, because it can be quite difficult to get through all the menu settings and bits and pieces on the Garmin watch, whereas the Apple Watch is a lot simpler to get around. Very briefly, I'm going to touch on straps and bands for both the two watches, and really specifically the metal bands that both Apple and Garmin make for the watches. The Apple Watch provides the titanium Milanese loop to go with the watch, whereas Garmin goes for the vented titanium, more traditional bracelet style for the watch. And the reason I show these two is because if you're wearing this watch all the time, you go to the office, you might want something that looks a bit nicer than the standard rubber straps that come with the watches, or any rubber strap basically. You might want something that sort of goes a bit more with, shirt, trousers. And in all honesty, Apple's titanium Milanese loop is miles ahead of the vented titanium bracelet from Garmin. Apple's is very smooth to the touch, no sharp edges, no burrs of metal, and it's infinitely adjustable because it's got a slider mechanism where you can move the buckle around. In contrast, the Garmin, it's got a pretty sharp buckle. I find that it often digs into my wrist through the day. As your wrist expands and contracts, I've often got lines on my wrist here, red lines where the watch has been digging in. The bracelet doesn't really have any easy on-the-fly adjustment. You do have these sort of four, probably not going to get picked up by the camera very well, but you've got these 4 holes where you can move the buckle around, but you need to have a pin around with you to actually do that. So on-the-fly adjustment is basically nil with this watch strap, which makes it a bit more uncomfortable in and out throughout the day, not to mention all the sharp bits, and I just don't think it's very well designed. So yeah, you will need traditional watch tools to sort of kind of adjust the bracelet and move the micro adjustment around to get that to work nicely. I also don't appreciate the lack of end links on the Garmin watches. They kind of feels like it's just a bit of a lazy execution. Most watches, most traditional watches, they'll have metal bracelets, they'll have an end link which creates a kind of seamless look from the watch head through to the rest of the watch, whereas this just has a flat bar with gaping holes. It just feels a bit lazy, if I'm honest, especially for something that costs as part of £200. I think this should come with end links just to give it a bit more of a polished look. So yeah, overall not impressed with the band with the titanium vented bracelet. And if you want something nice to wear in the office, if you get the Apple Watch bracelet is far better. In general, for the Apple Watch, there's a lot more high quality third-party straps available on the market. There's just generally less available on for the Garmin. You've got companies like Nomad and many others who create really high quality leather and regular straps, so you can really customize the Apple Watch to be how you like it. The best straps for Garmin come from Garmin, and some of them, like their nylon straps, are like ludicrously priced at something like £200, whereas nylon strap from Apple actually is £100, which still feels very expensive, but it's nothing compared to what Garmin are charging. Overall, though, I think this section ends in basically a draw. The Garmin passes as more of a regular watch, slightly lighter, and it has the torch. Apple Watch Ultra looks like an iPhone. It does have a better fit and finishing in better third-party bracelet support, and obviously an easier to use interface. So moving on to the next section, which is the apps, connectivity, and smartwatch features. Starting with the apps, Apple has chosen to spread the Apple Watch apps basically across 3 different apps. You've got the Watch app, which is used for changing settings and watch faces, that kind of thing. You've got the Fitness app, where you can see how much activity you've done, how progressed you are against your rings. And then you've also got the Health app, which stores all the other metrics basically that are collected by the watch. Average heart rate, HRV, all those other metrics that are sitting in the Health app. I guess this can lead to a little bit of confusion sometimes, because sometimes you might not know which app to go into to check the right thing, but it's reasonably well done. The nice thing about the Watch app is you can actually pretty much change every setting that's available on the watch on your phone. So if there's something that's a few menu levels deep and it's easier to just do it on your phone rather than doing it on your watch, go for it. You can't do that with everything on the Garmin. Things like watch faces have to be edited on the watch, which can be really fiddly, and just like actually sometimes means that I don't sort of edit watch faces on the Garmin because it's just a chore to do. The Fitness app from Apple keeps things very simple. Apple is trying to appeal to the masses here rather than sort of hardcore athletes, and I think it does a decent job at balancing ease of use with showing you enough data to make it useful. Everything is presented in a sort of tiled layout, and you can customize it to your liking to make sure that you're seeing what you want to see, and things that are relevant to you aren't visible. Garmin has 1 app. Well, actually it's 2 if you include the Connect IQ store, but I'll deal with that separately. The main Garmin Connect app is where all the magic happens with Garmin. 1 app with all the settings, fitness, and health information in one place. Again, you can customize the way Garmin looks to your liking, but Garmin makes visible straight away a lot more data that's collected from your watch than Apple does in the fitness or the health apps. Great thing about the Connect app, which I like, is you can actually track mileage on your bike or track mileage on your running shoes. It's interesting. I like to know how many miles I put on a pair of shoes just to make sure I'm not retiring them too early or using them for too long as well. So yeah, you can't do that in Apple's ecosystem. There's no native built-in functionality for tracking mileage on shoes or bike mileage or anything like that. So let's take a look at an activity that I wore both watches for. Was going for a run out back in January. So the Apple Watch recorded this as 5.04 kilometers, and Garmin recorded the run at 5.13 kilometers. Can't tell you which is actually correct. I haven't actually been out and physically measured how long the run that I did was, but they're both within 100 meters of each other. So for me, that's kind of fine. I think from an accuracy perspective, that's pretty good. And from Apple, we've got an average heart rate of 164 BPM, and from Garmin, there's an average heart rate of 163. Although the Garmin's heart rate was recorded with the chest strap. One thing that I will say, while I felt fine to rely solely on the Apple Watch's heart rate sensor when I'm out for a run with no need for a chest strap, I don't feel the same way about Garmin's. Apple's feels a lot more accurate and a lot more responsive to changes in heart rate, whereas the Garmin one tends to lag a bit behind. So whenever I run with the Garmin, I'm always using a chest strap. With the Apple Watch, I haven't really felt the need to wear the chest strap to record the HR, to record heart rate, and I found that Apple Watch's recorded heart rate versus the Garmin HRM Pro's recorded heart rate is fairly consistent between the two. Obviously, the HRM Pro, being an electrode-based strap, will measure smaller changes faster, but the Apple Watch hasn't lagged behind very much at all. So I'm happy to rely on the Apple Watch's heart rate sensor, not so much on the Fenix. The Fenix's built-in heart rate sensors. The Fenix 7 and the 7 Pro and the Fenix 8 both have the same heart rate sensor, so same issue with both on those. I think Garmin probably needs to do a little bit here to catch up with the accuracy of the Apple Watch Ultra 2's heart rate sensor. The thing that Garmin does much better than Apple here is it provides you with feedback on how your run actually, or your cycle or whatever it was, has actually impacted your body. Was it a tempo run? Was it a threshold run? Was it a base run? You don't get that kind of feedback on the Apple Watch. So you get a lot more feedback on how your training has affected your body with Garmin than you do with Apple. So yeah, serious athletes, you get a lot more feedback from Garmin as to how things have affected your body. It will also direct you to where you might have deficiencies in your training. Is your, do you need to do more base level activities? Do you need to do more work at threshold or like VO2 max? It will tell you where your load is insufficient. Apple does none of this. So, serious athletes trying to optimize performance and, squeeze the most out of your body, the Garmin is going to be better for that type of thing. Apple doesn't do any of that natively. For me, it's a little bit overkill on the Garmin side because I'm not out there trying to break records. I'm just trying to generally improve my fitness overall. But it has been interesting to see how things are impacting my body and where the focus has been. Has it made me change what I do? No. If I've got a deficiency in VO2 max, does that mean tomorrow I've gone out and done a really fast run? No, I haven't. I've stuck to what I've wanted to do and I've just used it. Well, I was like, oh, nice to know kind of thing. Both watches though now will let you know if you are overdoing it. In a previous video, somewhere, I bemoaned Apple's lack of sort of training load type feature. Apple always seemed to promote, do your 30 minutes of exercise rings every single day in, day out. And whilst that might sound good, the thing that can lead to is overtraining and, injury, illness, that kind of stuff, which is never good, and also will just put you much further back than actually taking some rest days. So it's good to see that Apple has implemented this feature now. Garmin and Apple take different approaches to doing this. Apple requires you to tag every workout with the level of effort. It will put an estimate in for you as you finish an activity. If you've gone for a run which it thinks you've done quite moderately, it will pop up as moderate, and it's up to you to go in and edit that. So it's using your perceived exertion to determine what your training load is, whereas Garmin does it differently, and it just uses the measurements that are recorded by the watch to determine how much effort you've put into a workout. I guess I kind of land more on Garmin's side with this because I think you can easily manipulate your rate of perceived exertion on the Apple and go, oh, I worked out really hard, and then or I didn't work out hard enough. And sometimes your emotions can come into play here, and you can put something down which really doesn't reflect how your body actually reacted. So I think Garmin taking measurements directly from your body is a much better approach to doing training load. Although having said that, it's good to have the feature on Apple, and it's much better than not having it, but I just think Garmin's is a little bit better. Overall, generally though, I prefer Garmin's approach with one app, but I do see why Apple has got lots of separate apps, simply because it just makes it a bit easier to direct people towards fitness. And the health app is actually a whole platform, not just the health app for things that are recorded from your Apple Watch. You can sync in a lot of external services, medical studies, all those types of different things into the health app. So having that separate, I get why it makes sense. Garmin does have some sort of ecosystem features, but it definitely doesn't hook into anywhere near as many apps and services as Apple Health can. This section though, I think comes down to a draw. Neither is doing anything particularly better or worse than the other that makes a significant difference. I think it just comes down to personal preference. So, sports connectivity now. Both can connect to heart rate sensors, cycling sensors, other sensors over Bluetooth. The thing with the Garmin though, Garmin can also connect via Ant Plus, which gives it a lot more access to a lot more accessories that are available on the market that only work via Ant Plus. The Apple Watch Ultra apparently integrates better with gym machines. I haven't been able to test that because there isn't a single gym near me that has anything that will sync with my Apple Watch. Garmin overall though I think has better connectivity from a sports perspective because you can connect things like Garmin Varia bike lights, you can connect turn signals, all those types of different things which you just can't do with the Apple Watch. One thing that's really helpful that I love on the Fenix versus the Apple Watch Ultra is that when you do connect something like a chest strap or a cadence meter or a speed sensor, as soon as you go into the activity, it tells you, bang, HRM connected, cadence sensor connected, speed sensor connected. The Apple Watch doesn't do that. Even if it has connected in the background, I always find myself having to go into the Bluetooth settings, check Bluetooth, is my heart rate monitor connected, and then come back out and go into the activity. It's a very small thing, and to be honest, I don't use the heart rate strap that much, but when I jump on the bike, I always have to check that the sensors have connected up to the watch. And it's just an annoying extra step, whereas it's just a nice, useful thing that Garmin just tells you straight away, yeah, all these things are connected and ready to go. The Apple Watch just doesn't do that. I think that's a really simple thing Apple could do, even a little icon in the corner showing you a chest strap or something like that. But yeah, it would just be nice to have that kind of a notification. Overall, though, on sports connectivity, I think the Garmin wins hands down here. They've been doing it for years. You can get pedals and cranks and all types of manner of different things that will connect to the Garmin ecosystem. Apple's a bit further behind on this right now. Now, onto smartwatch connectivity. And I think it's no surprise that Apple literally kills Garmin in this regard. Specific things that I've noticed, sort of Garmin Pay in the UK. There are very few banks that support Garmin Pay. It's nigh on useless for me. None of the banks that I have and that I'm with support Garmin Pay, so I can't use payments on the watch. Apple Pay, pretty much every bank I've come across supports Garmin Pay for debit cards and credit cards, so very easy to have your cards loaded on your watch. You can also get things like passes for your race onto your Apple Watch. If if your race goes into your Apple Wallet, it also shows up on your Apple Watch, which is nice and easy. You can just tag in using your watch. Haven't noticed anything that's easy to use like that on the Garmin. A major one for me though is you can have a cellular data plan on the Apple Watch, which basically means leave your phone at home, go out with the watch, you still get all your calls, text messages, etc., etc. And for me, when I'm out on a run, I don't like taking my phone, having it bouncing around in my pocket or whatever else I might be carrying with me. I much prefer to leave the phone at home. So from a smartwatch perspective, from a connectivity perspective, much nicer to have that. And I'm an Apple Music user as well. So Apple Music just does not work on the Garmin Fenix. I have a HomePods at home. Without Apple Music, they're pretty useless. I'm not going to pay a separate subscription for like Spotify or Deezer, so I'm unable right now to load music onto the Garmin Fenix. Whereas the Apple Watch, especially with the cellular data plan, you can either preload stuff or you can just stream it over the 4G connection straight to the watch while you're out for a run, which is amazing. Any kind of long run, even a short run, to be honest, I need music. Can't do without music. So with the Garmin, I'd have to carry my phone around. If I need to be contacted by the missus because something's happened with the kids. But actually, with the Apple Watch, I just take the Apple Watch pair of headphones, out I go. Still get phone calls, still stream music. Actually can stream a lot of other things as well, things like Audible books and other bits and pieces as well, which you just cannot do with the Garmin. I know probably Garmin have been blocked by Apple for putting Apple Music on there because Apple does stuff like that. Similarly, replying to messages and things like that, you just can't do on the Garmin watch, whereas you can happily do it on the Apple Watch. Most of that is due to Apple's limitations. But as an end user, I don't really care who's placed the limitations. I just can't do that stuff on the Garmin. Apps-wise, Garmin doesn't really have apps in the traditional sense. It has the Connect IQ store where you can get some decent watch faces and things like that. But I haven't really found any apps that aren't basically junk on the Garmin. Whereas the Apple Watch Ultra has a proper app store. You can get loads of different apps. Obviously, they're varying quality, but if you're thinking there's something that you want to be able to do with a watch, there's probably an Apple Watch app for it. Whereas there probably isn't an Apple Watch. There isn't a Garmin app to do that. On the Fenix 8, Garmin finally added a speaker and a microphone. Why do you need a speaker and a microphone on your watch? Well, it just allows you to take calls from the watch and also use a voice assistant on the watch should you need to. Do you want to take calls on the watch? Sometimes when your hands are full or actually you're out for a run without a phone, having the facility to take calls is great. Obviously, you can't do that without a phone on the Garmin because it doesn't have its own cellular data plan, but it's nice to see that they've included that at least so that you can just quickly take the call on the watch if you need to. They've also enabled a on-device voice assistant, and you can also tap into your phone's voice assistant on the Garmin watches, but I have found that to be pretty clunky and pretty slow, and it's far worse than the Siri experience on the Apple Watch Ultra. Siri is just generally far better to use directly on the Apple Watch rather than having to go via the Garmin watch to your phone and back kind of thing. So add in the fact that, in the house, your Apple Watch can control AirPlay speakers, your HomeKit devices, and just interacts really well into the whole Apple ecosystem. The Garmin Apple Watch Ultra 2 here, from a smartwatch perspective, is leaps and bounds ahead of the Garmin watch. So Apple, clear winner here. So onto day-to-day and sleep tracking. So if you wear either of the watches 24/7, you'll get your steps, your heart rate, your HRV, your average heart rates, and tons of other metrics recorded for both. There isn't really noticeably one that's better than the other, apart from in the area of sleep, which I found the Apple Watch is far better for sleep tracking than the Garmin is. Garmin regularly misses chunks of sleep, especially if I've slept, woken up to tend to a crying child, and then gone back to sleep again. the first part of the sleep will just get ignored by Garmin, whereas Apple will just treat it as an awake period and give me the full sleep, basically. So definite winner here is the Apple Watch Ultra from a day-to-day and sleep tracking perspective, especially on the sleep side. I think Garmin's got a bit of work to do on sleep to sort of catch up here. Just again, if you're enjoying this video and if you're stuck through this far, well, please don't forget to subscribe because, well, why not? It will help me greatly and you'll find out when I release the next video. So please don't forget to subscribe. So on to battery life. So Garmin is going to be the clear winner on longevity here, especially if you're doing some kind of multi-day event where you want to track GPS over several days and you don't want to have to carry around chargers and things like that. But that's not me. So far, the longest activity that I've done is a triathlon and a half marathon. And, I'm hoping to do a marathon in the not too distant future. But in all honesty, neither the Apple Watch nor the Fenix 8 or 7 are going to have a problem with keeping the battery life going for any of those activities that I'm thinking of doing. So with single event activity, kind of being a single event activity being a non-event between the two, any of the watches there are going to get through a single activity for me. It's how does the battery life in days compare? So the Fenix 7 Pro with the MIP display will last up to 18 days in smartwatch mode, which for me has translated into roughly 13 days without needing to charge, including GPS activities and other bits and pieces. 13 days, basically just under 2 weeks of use without charging. The Fenix 8 that I returned with its AMOLED display is supposed to get 6 days, but I was getting close to 7 days with the screen always on. The Apple Watch Ultra is 2 days consistently, regardless of what you do really, unless you're tracking like a 10-hour GPS activity on one day. You pretty much get 2 days consistently out of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 without fail. So it's quite clear Garmin is doing significantly better when it comes to battery life. But, and this is quite a big but, to achieve 6 days or 18 days battery life, you need to stick the watch onto the charger for the best part of 3 hours at a certain point. Now, I don't generally take my watch off for 3 hours in one go to have it able to sit and charge. I don't sit around for 3 hours waiting for the watch. So invariably I end up charging even the Garmin watches much more regularly than 13, 18, 6 days. With the Apple Watch Ultra 2, basically got into this rhythm of I go for a shower in the morning, I take the watch off, drop it on the charger, get out of the shower, get dressed, put the watch back on, and I'm usually back up to around 80, 90% battery life, and that means that little charging routine daily means I never really need to do any more charging. So in some ways, especially when I was wearing both, I got into the habit of dropping the Garmin onto the charger while I'm in the shower as well. Now obviously the Garmin having such more longevity in total means that you could do that process every 2 or 3 days, every 3 or 4 days, and still get back to sort of 80, 90% whatever battery life. But I just found myself getting into the habit of doing it. So really, it became a non-event, and it became like, it's great if you're going away for a 2-week holiday. You can probably just take the Fenix 7 Pro and forget the charger, and you'll probably be fine. But outside of that, I don't stick anything on to charge for 3 hours. I wouldn't leave it charging overnight, otherwise I wouldn't get my sleep metrics. So invariably, I ended up charging a lot more frequently anyway. So for my uses, yes, the Garmin battery life is much, much better. But it didn't have such a significant impact to me having the Apple Watch. Now, I like to take them off daily anyway for a short period because obviously you want to wash under there, don't want to get all that gunky, we want to get all of that gunky sweat out from under the watch strap. So yeah, with the Apple Watch charging so quickly, you can get a full charge in 1.5 hours versus the 3 hours on the Garmin watches. It just became a bit of a non-event, the battery life. And yes, the Garmin is the winner here on battery life, especially if you want to take many, many days and stick it on to charge for one long period. But if you're like me and you just take it off, put it on after about 20 minutes, neither the Apple Watch Ultra 2 or the Garmin is doing any better in reality. Yes, going on holiday, you don't need to take the charger if you're going for a week or two with the Fenix 7 Pro, but outside of that, battery life was really a non-factor for me. But regardless, Garmin is the winner here by quite a long way. So on to sports features. So there are two different philosophies going on here. Garmin is quite clearly aimed at athletes, and Apple is more aiming at the masses trying to improve their fitness. This doesn't mean you can't be an athlete and use an Apple Watch, or you can't be just generally trying to improve your fitness and use a Garmin watch. but I think you'll have a better experience going the other way. Apple has more motivation, it prompts you more often to move and to close your rings, and it lays out the data in such a way that it isn't overwhelming for the end user. Garmin, conversely, can feel like a bit of a data overload, which if you're a serious athlete might be exactly what you want. If you're looking to run PBs and optimize to squeeze every last bit of performance out of yourself, go with the Garmin. Garmin is perfect. Both have tons of activity profiles. You can probably track whatever it is that you're doing. I think Garmin probably has a few more, but both will cover you off with a profile for whatever activity that you're tracking. The place where I find Garmin does a lot better is structured workout plans. Garmin Coach is built into the watch, so that gives you access to 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon training plans for free directly on the watch, and they're also adaptable as well. So it will plan out a 12-week, 16-week, 18-week program for you, and you just have to go ahead and follow it. Do the runs on the days that they come up, and the watch will prompt you to do what you need to do within each of those workouts. Really good. You can also create your own structured workouts in the Garmin Connect app, sync them over to the watch for free, and just go out and just follow those directly on the watch. And you can also sync plans from something like Training Peaks or Strut or Runner or another service basically that's about. Apple does have structured workouts. Manual ones have to be created and edited directly on the watch, which can get really fiddly and cumbersome. You can also sync plans from Training Peaks, Runner, other external services, but natively there's no Garmin Coach-like service given for free with the Apple Watch. You'll usually have to pay for a subscription of some kind to sync structured workouts onto the Apple Watch Ultra. I think Garmin Coach gives Garmin the clear win here, especially if you're trying to do a couch to 5K or your first 10K, something like that. The ease of use and the training plan that goes in there will test you, but it's easy to follow, it's all for free, and it's really easy to set up as well. So on to the conclusion. So straight off, whilst I would be happy with either, I'm sticking with the Apple Watch Ultra for a few specific reasons. First major one for me, Apple Music support. I need music when I run. I don't want to have to carry my phone around to make sure that I have music, so Apple Music support is a massive one for me. The second is cellular data connectivity. Again, don't want to carry my phone around. I can have a plan. I can have the cellular plan on the watch. I can be contacted if there's an emergency, or I can get in contact if I'm in an emergency. I can also stream music, stream podcasts, stream Audible books, many different things just by having that. And you can also get messages and notifications, and you might want to turn those off when you're out for a run. You might want them on. It's up to you. But the facility is there. You can't do any of that with the Garmin because it just doesn't have a cellular plan. It also doesn't have access to Apple Music for whatever reason. I do miss Garmin Coach and the running plans, the structured plans. I always found I did really well with the structured training plans that were available. But I just can't overlook the convenience of the Apple Watch on a day-to-day basis versus the Garmin. It's got much better smartwatch features, much better integration into the Apple ecosystem. It unlocks my Mac Mini, it unlocks my MacBook. I can control lights, I can control the security system, camera, control cameras in the house. It just is a lot more convenient for me. But also from a sports perspective and fitness perspective, it really does everything that I need to do without going into tons and tons of data. It was nice looking at the data on the Garmin, but it never really prompted me to do anything differently, which in some ways for me just felt like I was wasting my time looking at it. So there you have it. I'm sticking with the Apple Watch Ultra 2. So which watch are you using? Are you using either of these? Are you using something different? Let me know in the comments. And I hope you've liked the video. If you've stuck through this far, then please don't forget to subscribe. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks.